Africa 2024 on WION The World is One. I'm Eric Njoka, and this week it's all about the events, stories that defined, shaped, transformed, destroyed, captured the headlines and make a mud on the continent for the last 12 months. The show starts right now.
Elections were held in African countries spanning presidential, legislative and local levels. These elections showcased a mixture of continuity, change and the complexities of governance in the region. While some countries experienced transformative political shifts, others continued under the dominance of entrenched political systems. This year highlighted the spectrum of political dynamics, from multi-party democracies embracing change to single-party systems clinging to power. Mauritius surprised many when the opposition toppled the tiny island country's past class of dynastic rule. Their dedication to the democratic process and eventually electing a new government under Prime Minister-elect Dr. Naveen Ramgoolam.
I did what I could for the country and the people. The people chose another team to run the country. Of course, you have to accept this choice. You have to respect that choice. I wish my country and the population good luck.
Botswana has long been recognized for its stable democratic institutions. But this election underscored the electorate's desire for substantial change. The results reflected widespread dissatisfaction with the BDP's handling of economic challenges and its perceived failure to adapt to the evolving needs of the populace. For the first time since its independence in 1966, Botswana saw the ruling Botswana Democratic Party lose power.
Now, naturally, now I have a lot of energy. I still do. I mean, I had enough energy, Your Excellency, to do the next 3.5 years. You just cut it short.
Is the maturation, if you will. Our democracy has demonstrated today more than it ever has before that this is a mature democracy. The maturity of a democracy is measured, we know, from this very occurrence. Can power move from one regime to another regime peacefully?
In Ghana, the return of John Mahama to the presidency marked a significant moment in the country's political history. Running on a platform of a new beginning, a new direction, Mahama of the National Democratic Congress defeated the incumbent Vice President Mohamedou Bawumia by the largest margin of victory in 25 years. Mahama secured 56.6% of the vote compared to Bawumia's 41.6%, with a voter turnout of nearly 61%. Mahama's victory followed 2 terms of governance by President Nana Akufo-Addo, whose new patriotic party faced widespread criticism over Ghana's economic woes. In an election that international observers hailed as a historic of Somaliland's peaceful democracy, Somaliland opposition leader Abdirahman Siro defeated incumbent President Muse Bihi Abdi. The elections set up a handover of power as the breakaway Somali region pushes for global recognition. The breakaway region has enjoyed a comparative period of peace since achieving autonomy 3 decades ago, just as Somalia plunged into a civil war from which it has yet to emerge. While Siro has signaled broad support for the proposed pact with Ethiopia, his commitment to implementing it is not clear. Some analysts suspect he could be more open to dialogue with Somalia's government which opposes the agreement. Then there was the election of Senegal's opposition candidate Diomaye Faye, as well as the recently concluded snap legislative polls, marked a peaceful transition of power. It showed how democratic processes can bring about meaningful political change. Faye's victory was all the more remarkable because of a strong voter turnout of 61.3%. There was a deep engagement of Senegalese citizens in the democratic process and the integrity of the electoral process. This is despite the challenges posed by prior civil unrest involving Ousmane Sonko. And finally, Namibia's 2024 general elections resulted in a historic milestone, the election of Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah as the country's first female president. Representing the ruling Southwest Africa People's Organization SWAPO, Nandi-Ndaitwah's victory made her the second current female head of state in Africa, following Tanzania's Samia Suluhu Hassan. Despite her personal triumph, SWAPO's political dominance continued to erode. The party's majority in the National Assembly was reduced to 51 seats, its lowest since Namibia's independence in 1990. The outbreak of Mpox, especially among children in Eastern and Southern Africa, raised alarm. According to a UNICEF report, children and vulnerable communities were at the sharp end of an expanding outbreak. UNICEF said that over 200 confirmed cases were detected across 5 countries: Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and South Africa during August. Burundi reported the highest number of infections across the region. As of the 20th of August 2024, 170 confirmed Mpox cases were detected across 26 out of the 49 districts in the country. As cases of Mpox surged, the Africa CDC vowed to supply 10 million doses by 2025. According to the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, till August, 3,101 confirmed and 15,636 suspected cases were reported from 12 African Union countries, resulting in 541 deaths, a fatality rate of 2.89%. The hardest hit country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the new Clade 1B strain was first detected in September 2023.
We are trying to control the situation a little. As we are seeing the sick people, these are the sick who came to us barely 2 days ago. We have already established treatment, their management according to the national protocol, the treatment of which is still symptomatic.
More cases have been reported since the beginning of the year than all of 2023, which saw a total of 14,383 cases, and that's according to the Africa CDC. Mpox is a viral disease that can spread from animals to humans, but also human to human through sexual or close physical contact. Symptoms include fever, muscular aches, and large boil-like skin lesions. It was a double whammy for the continent. While the continent was battered by Mpox outbreaks, a report published by the World Health Organization in August showed that the number of deaths caused by cholera surged. From the 1st of January to the 29th of September 2024, a total of 127,283 cholera cases were reported across 17 countries in the African region. During this period, the highest number of over 25,000 cases was reported from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, and Zambia, with over 20,000 cases came next. During the same period, a total of 2,268 deaths were reported from 14 countries, with the highest number recorded in Zambia with over 600 deaths. Africa contributes only a small share of global greenhouse gas emissions, but bears the brunt of climate change. This impacts food security, ecosystems, and economies, drives displacement, migration, and intensifies conflicts over shrinking resources. The 2023-2024 El Niño triggered severe drought across southern Africa, with delayed rains, prolonged dry spells, and extreme heat. Nearly 23 million people faced severe food insecurity, with Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique hardest hit. 6 countries, Botswana, Lesotho, Malawi, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, have declared national drought disasters. On the other hand, in 2024, 27 countries in Africa's tropical zone saw rainfall far exceeding historical averages. According to Africa's Center for Strategic Studies, flooding from this heavy rain affected around 11 million people, causing 2,500 deaths. 4 million people were displaced. Millions of hectares of cropland were submerged. Hundreds of thousands of livestock were lost. 10 million children in Niger, Nigeria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Mali were unable to attend school due to flooding or schools being repurposed for displaced people. While West and Central Africa's rainy season typically lasts from June to September, severe flooding continued into November in central and southern Chad, northern Cameroon, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, central and southern Mali, southern Niger, northern Nigeria, Senegal, and northern Sierra Leone. Kenya was hit hard by El Niño-induced rainfall and subsequent flooding. More than 400,000 people were affected, including the displacement of 40,000 households living in Nairobi's informal settlements. The 2.4 million people displaced due to floods have compounded the strain felt from Africa's record 45 million forcibly displaced people, largely as a result of conflict. Africa's persisting conflicts are compounding crises of governance on the continent, straining already fragile regions and opening the door to foreign exploitation through proxy forces, resource trafficking, and information manipulation. Let's begin with the Sahel. Militant Islamist group violent events and fatalities in Africa remained at all-time highs in 2024. Primarily as a result of continued record levels of violence in the Sahel. The Sahel accounted for over half of all militant Islamist activity on the continent in 2024, with fatalities nearly tripling since 2020 to approximately 11,000. Groups like the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin coalition and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara have intensified attacks and expanded their territorial control in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, as they push farther south and west, despite all these countries having a military rule. Foreign authoritarian actors, primarily Russia, China, and increasingly Iran, have facilitated the democratic backsliding witnessed in Africa in recent years. Through disinformation, direct election interference, deployment of mercenaries, support of extra-constitutional seizures of power, and undermining the United Nations, these foreign actors have attempted to prop up undemocratic authorities and normalize authoritarianism while paralyzing popular sovereignty as a means of expanding their influence in Africa. From the Sahel, let's move on north. The conflict between Sudan's military factions has made the country the largest displacement crisis in the world. Over 11.5 million people have been internally displaced and more than 2.3 million people have fled the country since the start of the war in April 2023. Food shortages, including famine, are estimated to be killing hundreds of people a day, and an additional 3 million people are facing acute food insecurity in 2024. Sudan's implosion has reverberated throughout the fragile region, compounding neighboring states' own conflicts and political instability. The internal conflicts in Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan, and Ethiopia are now further complicated by Sudan's instability. From the north, let's move to the center of the continent. The Congo Basin rainforests represent roughly 70% of Africa's forest cover and are the world's most important terrestrial carbon sink. The Congo Basin is also integral to the water cycles supporting the Nile River Basin and West Africa. Yet, only 14% of its land cover has been granted protected status, and 30% of its forest cover has been lost since 2000, largely due to unregulated commercial logging and mining. Currently, the forests are shrinking by 1 to 5% a year. Transnational organized criminal networks and armed militant groups like the M23 are taking advantage of weak forest management in the region to plunder this rich resource. In East Africa, Kenya dominated the headlines following President William Ruto's proposal to increase taxes. Days of protests culminated in unrest and activist movements that reverberated across the world, with the youth demanding President William Ruto's resignation. Sparked by economic grievances and lingering discontent over scrapped tax hikes, the protests turned violent, claiming lives and causing numerous injuries. Demonstrators in cities across the East African nation called for systemic changes to address corruption and poor governance. And finally, the protests in Mozambique have had a negative impact on the country's tourism. While some travelers have postponed their trips, others have cancelled altogether. 2 Australian firms have announced that they are shutting down their operations and exiting Mozambique. The Southern African nation has been gripped by violence since the highly disputed October 9th presidential polls. These protests are being pushed by Venancio Mondlane, who claims that the ruling Frelimo party rigged the election. South Africa continues to keep its Lebombo main border crossing with Mozambique shut, with Mondlane hiding in South Africa. "2024 proved to be a tumultuous year across 3 regional blocs in the continent, which have stoked division and dysfunction. Leaders of the West African regional grouping ECOWAS approved the withdrawal of 3 countries ruled by the military from the bloc, but offered a 6-month grace period for them to reconsider. Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger plan to withdraw from ECOWAS in January after refusing the bloc's demand to restore democratic rule. The 3 departing countries were founding members when ECOWAS was established in 1975 to improve economic and political integration in West Africa. So this was a huge blow to what was Africa's most developed trade grouping. Citizens of all ECOWAS countries currently have the right to live and work in all member states, while goods can circulate freely. The Alliance of the Sahel States, or AES from its French acronym, announced visa-free travel and residency rights for ECOWAS citizens. However, the 3 countries are poor and landlocked, so most migrants move from them to the richer coastal countries in West Africa. West African Bloc is pinning hopes on ambitious superhighway. In the period between 29th of January and 29th of July 2025, the trio can be readmitted to the bloc should they decide to rejoin the community. So far, the military juntas have refused to remain in the bloc despite efforts to persuade them. The other bloc that witnessed widespread division was in the Horn of Africa. For months, a spat between Somalia and Ethiopia had been creeping towards a crisis. In June, Somalia threatened to expel all of Ethiopia's troops from its territory, where they have long spearheaded the regional fight against Al-Shabaab. a jihadist group. By October, Somalia had formed a military alliance with Egypt and Eritrea, Ethiopia's bitterest foes, as Ethiopia's army chief mused openly about arming groups hostile to the Somali government. Many feared the tensions could set off proxy wars and draw in other powers in the vicinity or create a security vacuum in Somalia that Al-Shabaab might exploit. However, after negotiations in Ankara brokered by Turkey, a joint declaration was signed by Abiy Ahmed, Ethiopia's Prime Minister, and Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, Somalia's president, agreeing to leave behind differences and contentious issues. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Turkey's president, called it a historic reconciliation, but there are reasons to be skeptical. Ethiopia will now seek access to and from the sea under the sovereign authority of the Federal Republic of Somalia. It has also agreed to respect Somalia's territorial integrity. Somalia will provide Ethiopia with an outlet to the sea for trade. In return, Ethiopia has rescinded its offer to recognize Somaliland. And in the south, unrest in Mozambique threatened the Southern African Development Community, or SADC. SADC called for an extraordinary summit to discuss the political unrest in Mozambique. Zimbabwe, the current chair of the Southern African Development Community, hosted the 16-member regional bloc meeting that had no solutions on the ongoing crises in Mozambique. Critics argue SADC has not been up to its task. Mozambique's opposition has criticized SADC's electoral observation mission after it praised the conduct of the electoral process. And finally, the pan-continental body of 55 member states will elect a successor to Musa Faki Mahamat, the head of its executive organ, in February 2025. 3 veterans of African politics are in the running for the top job. The candidates in the forthcoming election for African Union Commission Chair are Raila Odinga of Kenya, Mahmoud Ali Yusuf of Djibouti, and Richard Randria Mandrato of Madagascar. On December 13th, the 3 discussed their visions for the continent in a first-ever election debate broadcast from the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. All of them addressed the issues of security in Africa, the economic integration of the continent, and AU reforms. The AUC election process requires candidates to secure a 2/3 majority from the AU's 55 member states, a feat that often demands regional alliances and strategic negotiations. This year, Africa showed a modest improvement in its performance compared to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics. The continent won a total of 39 medals, which included 13 gold, 12 silver, and 14 bronze, across 12 nations, with Kenya leading the charge, securing 11 podium finishes. While this marked an increase of 2 medals from the 2020 Games, it still falls short of the 45 medals earned by African athletes at the Rio 2016 Olympics. However, the medal tally doesn't fully capture the true story. There were remarkable achievements that showcased incredible grit and resilience. One of the standout stories came from Botswana's Letsile Tebogo, the 21-year-old who draws inspiration from Usain Bolt, delivered a stunning upset by thwarting Noah Lyle's hopes of a sprint double at the Paris Games. Tebogo surged to victory in the 200 meters, setting a new African record with a time of 19.45 seconds. American athletes Kenny Bednarek and Noah Lyles followed, claiming silver in 19.62 seconds and bronze in 19.7 seconds respectively. Amidst various controversies, including concerns about her gender, Iman Khalif made headlines. She faced relentless online bullying and criticism from certain officials, but silenced all her critics by clinching gold for Algeria sparking waves of jubilation and celebration throughout the streets of Algiers. Another African athlete who left a lasting impression was Soufiane El Bakkali, who returned to Morocco after his stunning victory in the 3,000 meters steeplechase at the Paris 2024 Olympics. El Bakkali successfully defended his gold medal, having previously triumphed at the Tokyo 2021 Olympics. Another team to receive a hero's welcome was South Sudan's Bright Stars basketball team. A vibrant celebration awaited them at Juba Airport as they returned from Paris, marking their first ever appearance at the Olympic Games. Although their dreams of medal glory were dashed after defeats by the United States and Serbia in the group stages, preventing them from reaching the quarterfinals, their performance in Paris brought immense pride and joy to the world's youngest nation, a neighbor to war-torn Sudan. Nearly 150 athletes represented Team South Africa at the Paris 2024 Olympics, marking the country's 21st appearance at the Games. South Africa entered the competition aiming to improve on their performance at Tokyo, where they secured 3 medals, 2 a gold and silver from Tatiana Schweinmaker, and a silver from Bianca Buitendag. They doubled the tally to 6 medals in Paris. Joan van Dijk's silver in the women's javelin was the only one of Africa's 24 athletics medals, which came away from track events or the marathon. And who can forget the incredible performances of the Kenyan and Ethiopian athletes? Kenya's Faith Kipyegon made history by becoming the first woman to win 3 consecutive Olympic 1,500 meters gold medals, delivering a spectacular display of middle distance running. Another Kenyan, Emmanuel Wanyonyi, held off world champion Marco Arop of Canada to clinch the Olympic men's 800 meters gold in Paris. Wanyonyi set a personal best of 1 minute 41.19 seconds, with Arop taking silver just 1/100th of a second behind in a North American record. The legendary Eliud Kipchoge unfortunately dropped out the race, but Ethiopia's Tamirat Tola seized the opportunity, delivering a masterclass in solo front running to win the Olympic men's marathon in Paris. But the next 4 years leading up to LA 2028 could prove to be challenging for Africa. The biggest hurdles remain in the early identification of talent, nurturing it once discovered, and ultimately helping athletes reach their full potential.